Paul tells us God began a good work in you, and He's going to bring it to completion. We know He's talking about being saved, but do we know all that being saved includes? In Philippians 1, verse 6, Paul writes, "And I am sure of this, that He who began a good work in you will bring it to completion at the day of Jesus Christ." Paul's writing to believers in Philippi, so we know that He is God, and we know the good work is salvation. But what do you think of when you think of being saved? I know for me in the past, and I still catch myself using the word this way sometimes, well, being saved, that's being forgiven, and then because of that, going to heaven. That's being saved. That's salvation. And it certainly includes those. He began a good work in you. It begins when we're forgiven, what the Bible calls being justified. And it culminates, it's completed, however things play out. Once we die, Jesus returns, the end times, when my body is resurrected, glorified into an eternal body, and I'll spend eternity with God in heaven. So salvation includes that, but that's not all it includes. Think about just the time frame of our lives. I know for me, I've been forgiven for a lot of years, and I'm still not dead yet. Hope to have a few more years at least. There's been a long time. Well, all of that in between is also a part of salvation. It's also included in being saved. The Bible calls that process in the middle sanctification or transformation. It is me becoming more and more like Christ, growing and maturing spiritually. And really, that's where our focus is to be. Based on the fact I'm forgiven and the assurance I have of heaven, my focus is to be on growing and maturing. And we see that. It's interesting. Paul does something similar in the opening of Colossians and Ephesians. He tells the people, I'm thankful you're forgiven and you're going to heaven, but I want to focus on now, you growing and maturing. And he does the same thing here in verses 9 through 11. He says, "It is my prayer that your love may abound more and more with all knowledge and all discernment, so that you may approve what is excellent, and so be pure and blameless for the day of Christ, filled with the fruit of righteousness that comes through Jesus Christ to the glory and praise of God." That's just almost entirely focused on the now, growing and maturing as Christians. Paul is letting them know, being saved is more than just being forgiven and eventually going to heaven. Being a Christian is more than that. It includes this discipleship, if you want to call it, in the middle. And maybe some of us, as we begin to apply this, do I realize that being a Christian and being a disciple, it's the same thing. Disciple is not like an advanced level of Christian that, maybe I'll get to, maybe I won't, an optional add-on. Or maybe we know I'm supposed to do it, but we view it as, I'm supposed to, I ought to, I have to, I better, instead of I get to. This is part of God's plan all along. He forgives me so the relationship can be restored. It's going to culminate in eternity in heaven. But in between, God is helping me grow and mature so I can more fully experience this relationship, experience Him and His love and all that He intends. It's interesting, Paul writes to the different churches in different areas, and he certainly loves them all, but he seems to know the Philippians in a more personal way. He spent more time, they've done more with him. And so as he prays these things that I want you to grow, well, how does he view that growth? Definitely not as a burden. He's not saying, hey, great friends of mine, I hope you'll be burdened with this growth thing. If no one really likes it, God insists we have to do it. No. Paul knows it's a blessing. He knows it's not always easy, that's for sure, but he knows ultimately it's best. It's a blessing. He wants it for them, and we should want it just as much. Well, the thing I want us to take from this and chew on some and grow from is ask yourself, what can I do to tangibly change my understanding of salvation? First of all, what needs to change? Is it, that discipleship is extra, sanctification is optional, or is it the way I look at those things, it's a burden? What needs to change? And then what can I do? Maybe I put a reminder some way. Salvation equals this. Maybe I have a conversation with someone. Maybe I do a study, read through the Bible. Whatever it is to help ingrain this, because our understanding needs to change before our actions can change. And so start with this. We'll build on it as we go.